Good evening, everyone. I'll call to order the Arvada City Council meeting for February 4th, 2019. Call upon Council Member David Jones.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think we have a couple of scouts, Boy Scouts in the audience tonight. Awesome. If you wouldn't mind coming up to the podium here and introducing yourself and telling us what merit badge or rank you're working on.
Hi, my name is Larson, and I'm working on citizenship in the community merit badge.
And what troop are you with?
21.
Awesome.
My name is Ivor, and I'm in Pack 21 or Troop 21, and I'm working citizens in the community.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Actually, before you go away, if you'll come and stand at the podium, what we're going to do is we're going to have a moment of silence. And then, if you would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight, that would be awesome. All right? So if you'll join me in a moment of silent reflection. And now, if our Boy Scouts will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'll wait till we stand up and get in our positions. All right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much for your help tonight.
Kristen Rush, if you'll do the roll call.
Mayor Williams.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Marriott.
Here.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Here.
Councilmember Ford.
Here.
Councilmember Jones.
Here.
Councilmember McGough.
Here.
Councilmember Miller.
Here.
Okay, we've got some public comment on items not scheduled on the agenda tonight, and I'll call upon Randy Staffen first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Randy Stafford, and I'm here to speak with you tonight about the Jefferson Parkway Public Highway Authority's funding request for 2019. As a member of the Jefferson Parkway Advisory Committee, I recently received a memo from JPPHA Executive Director Bill Ray containing his responses to the committee's formal recommendations to the JPPHA board, which I co-presented in this very chamber in November with one of my colleagues on the committee who's here tonight. I was disappointed to learn that Mr. Ray is relying on CDPHE regarding the safety of constructing the Jefferson Parkway. I submit that CDPHE has failed in its mission to protect the health of Colorado's people with respect to Rocky Flats. If that were not so, 2 residents of the neighborhood of Five Parks right here in Arvada would not have developed the extremely rare heart cancer cardiac angiosarcoma, as just one example. Also, it would be less than responsible to sponsor this project without first reviewing the records of Colorado Grand Jury 89-2, which may contain relevant information on contamination in the Parkway right-of-way. You may be aware that a petition was recently filed in court in Colorado to unseal those records. The City of Arvada's amicus brief complementing that petition would be most appropriate and most appreciated. The Rocky Flats site makes the list of the world's most notorious nuclear sites, from Hiroshima to Fukushima, included in the 2018 book Fallout by Fred Pierce, and if I had brought my copy, I would have held it up. Fred Pierce has reported on environmental science and development issues in 58 countries for 3 decades. And Arvada is about to become the first municipality in world history to attempt such a massive development project as a parkway in such close and contaminated proximity to such a notorious nuclear site. The people whose health may be affected by this project are Arvadans, citizens of this city. Mayor Williams, they are people like my mother, a breast cancer survivor living with 1 kidney, on whose 17th birthday while a junior at Arvada High School, the 1957 fire occurred at the Rocky Flats nuclear weapons plant. They are people like the 848 respondents to the recent Metropolitan State University Health Survey of Rocky Flats downwinders who reported suffering rare cancers at a rate twice the national rate of rare cancers. Honorable council members, this is a moral issue. You swore an oath to faithfully perform the duties of your office to which you were elected, and the most paramount of those duties is to provide for public safety. I respectfully submit that you will fail in that particular duty if you sponsor a project that exposes citizens to airborne plutonium oxide dust particles. No justification for the Jefferson Parkway supersedes that duty. As a matter of moral obligation and responsible government, I implore you to not provide further funding for the Jefferson Parkway project without first imposing conditions of parkway realignment
Okay, Mr. Stafford, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up.
and adequate airborne contamination monitoring by an agency more competent than CDPHE. Thank you very
sir.
much.
Next call on Brett Vernon.
Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you for your time. My name is Brett Vernon. I'm a resident of Layden Rock, and I was a member of the Jefferson Parkway Advisory Committee along with Randy. I have last appeared before the City Council in December requesting your support for inclusion of recommendations from the Advisory Council in the soon-to-be-released RFP for the Jefferson Parkway. Since that time, we've held a community meeting and subsequently completed a survey of the Layden Rock residents, which received 795 responses regarding design considerations and mitigations for sound, light, and safety concerns. With the assistance of the Parkway Board and Executive Director Bill Ray, we were invited into meetings with the team from HDR, who is actually writing the RFP. First meetings of the neighbors of the Parkway was this morning at Bill Ray's offices. We found the HDR team to be very engaged and supportive of the Layden Rock community, and we both walked away with several action items for our next meeting, which is next week. We're optimistic that as many of the mitigations relating to Layden Rock as possible will be incorporated into the RFP. One design consideration which cannot be incorporated is the requested access road from the northern end of Layden Rock to Highway 72. Of the 18 recommendations included in the survey, residents stated that this was their second most critical recommendation, second only to creative sound mitigation. There simply isn't room in the Parkway right-of-way to be able to incorporate an access road, either in the Layden Rock end or the Highway 72 end. The topography there is challenging. However, there's still a need for a road from northern Layden Rock to Highway 72. It would provide an alternative route for first responders in the event that 82nd Street is blocked by either flood, fire, or accident. It would provide residents with an additional escape route if that area was threatened by a natural or man-made disaster. It would reduce traffic on Indiana, especially through a section of the roadway which would be most difficult to expand, and would increase utilization of the parkway by giving residents access that they would not otherwise have. So now the question is, where could one be built, and how could it be funded, and how could it be constructed? I don't know those answers yet, but I would like to explore those possibilities with city personnel and with city representatives to be able to try and explore those possibilities. In today's meeting with HDR, they confirmed that there may be efficiencies gained in building the parkway and the access road at the same time, even if they're not in the same location. I don't know how to quantify those efficiencies, but I do know that we realistically only have one opportunity to do this, and that's in concert with the Parkway build. Thank you very much for your time. Would appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, sir. Next, I'll call upon Jeff Stanisławski.
Good evening. My name's Jeff Staniszewski. It's very common that my name is pronounced any which way, but so Jeff is good.
I apologize.
No, that's fine. I'm going to talk with you about alpha radiation. And I'm not going to ask you if you know or don't know. I'm going to make some comments, and I'm going to give you the answers. So alpha radiation is associated with a number of different elements, but in this case, it's plutonium. And a key thing I'd like you to recall is that for each picocurie of radiation emitted, it generates 2.2 particles per minute. Those 2.2 particles, if they are lodged inside your body, so if they are inhaled, absorbed, or taken in through a wound, will start to kill cells. That's indisputable. The second thing, as a former safety and health manager for DuPont, we typically handle what are called MSDSs, Material Data Safety Sheets. In each and every one of those sheets, there's always an issue that says, this is what can kill you, this is the concentrations to avoid. There are none for plutonium for the simple reason that it's hard to test plutonium on people without dire consequences. So keep that in mind. You know about CERCLA. I don't know that you know about a methodology called MARSIMS, which requires a much more aggressive testing program to assure that a site is clean. And that brings me to the point of sampling. So when Rocky Flats was tested, they did what was called a 90% confidence interval. I won't bore you with the facts, but 90% says that in a given number, we're confident that we're going to get 90% of the true answers, which means 10% of them could be wrong. So if you were on an airplane and I told you had a 90% chance of surviving the flight, would you take the flight? Thought of another way, in 2016, Donald Trump won, even though the confidence interval then was much higher. So don't bank on the fact that 90% sounds good. I'm going to talk to you about sample size. 14 samples were taken, one for every 30 acres. Of those 14, at least one, and actually more than one sample, had exposure levels that were higher than background noise. Remember the 2.2 value? 2.2 times the highest sample noted was 18.36 particles that will destroy cells. We don't know what the other data samples were. Now, I'm going to do a little test for you. 8.8 picocuries per gram, okay? 18.36 particles given off that can kill a person. Went outside and dug this out of my yard. Not dangerous. How many grams do you think this is? Take a guess.
Tell us, sir.
7, all right? 7 grams times that 18 particles, 126 particles in this 7-gram sample will be emitted once you start disturbing the ground. And if you don't know the data, think about how many tons of soil you're going to move and how much you're going to generate by putting these particles into the air. The simple answer is you don't know. And this is not my opinion. This is what came out of those reports. And so like Randy, I'm going to say that until you answer those questions, you have no good business moving forward with this project. So I do encourage you to deny funding to the Jeffco Parkway.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Mike Raby?
Excuse me, I was wanting to talk in the 5-minute comment section. Is that all right?
Okay, that'll be at the end of the meeting.
That's fine.
Okay. Bruce Morrison?
Hi, I'm Bruce Morrison. I want to thank the council for their service to the community and all the people that have showed up to make comments. I just want to comment on something that's been worked on in the city, and that is it's sometimes called single hauler trash, sometimes called one street, one hauler. And I just want to say I'm not totally indifferent to the power and consumerism and people choosing their own people to serve them. Like, if you don't like a business, you don't support it. I'm very strong on supporting local business and making those kind of consumer decisions. But with trash hauling, I think there's a lot of things that outweigh that. One is it should be cheaper. The other thing is the wear on the roads, which is expensive to the city and the taxpayers. And the other, of course, is the environmental damage with the increased use of fossil fuels and that sort of thing. So I thank you for considering these proposals, and I hope you support a more organized trash hauling system. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I'll make a public announcement that we are going to be having a workshop on this topic next week. So,
Okay.
And we'll be having many more conversations, so stay tuned. Joyce Richardson.
Thank you for hearing me out. I am one of the 64% that are pro single hauler or one truck, one street trash hauling. I really hope that the city can put this together because I really look forward to the day that I only have one truck rumble down my cul-de-sac and turn around and go out instead of the 9 that we have in a week. And I live on a cul-de-sac that is somewhat transient, so it's not even something that I could work with my neighbors to build a coalition and have only one truck. So I really look forward to the city helping me negotiate a better price and only one truck. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anybody else that would like to address City Council during the 3-minute session? Fair enough. We'll move on then to new business. We have several items on our consent agenda tonight. The first is a resolution approving a proposed 2019 operation plan and budget of the Indiana Marketplace Business Improvement District. The second one's a resolution authorizing an addendum to the Elevon Master Services Agreement between Arvada and Evelon Inc. for merchant card services. Projected amount is about $200,000 per year. Next one is a resolution authorizing an agreement between Arvada Diamond Contracting Corporation for Ralston Water Treatment Plant reaction tank bypass in an amount not to exceed approximately $540,000. Next one is a resolution authorizing an agreement between Arvada and Blue Skies Associates Limited for professional services referring or relating to police records data conversion in an amount not to exceed approximately $215,000. Next one's a resolution authorizing a lease agreement between Arvada and Frontline Farming for agricultural production at the Majestic View Nature Center. And the final consent agenda item is a resolution authorizing an agreement between Arvada and WL Contractors for on-call and scheduled traffic signal maintenance in an amount not to exceed $800,000. It would entertain a motion. Mr. Marriott.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that consent items R 19-016 through R 19-021 be approved.
Motions for approval of the consent agenda. All votes are cast. That passes 7-0. We have no first readings tonight, but we do have a resolution R 19022, a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement for equipment transfer and release of liability between the City of Arvada and the Town of Morrison. Mr. Devon.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this resolution will authorize an intergovernmental agreement that will enable the Arvada Police Department to transfer some surplus police equipment, which are tasers, to the Town of Morrison. Because Morrison will provide the city with a release of liability in exchange for the tasers, the transfer should be memorialized in this brief intergovernmental agreement. This basically helps out the Town of Morrison while allowing the Arvada Police Department to get to dispose of some surplus equipment that another community will still find usable. And so we're recommending approval of the resolution to make this transfer effective.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
Is there any questions? I know Nancy clicked on
Did you
it.
have a question? Okay.
If there's any questions, I'd like to make the motion. and
Go
then
ahead.
Make a comment. I move that Resolution 19-022, a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement for the equipment transfer and release of liability between the City of Arvada and the Town of Morrison be approved.
Motions for approval?
And I'd also like to make a comment to staff. I like these kind of things where I know there's communities that may not have the ability to purchase items, and you hear stories like this and fire trucks and other things being transferred to other smaller communities that just don't have the financials or the power to supply with their staff. So I just applaud you guys working with your partners in smaller communities.
Okay, all votes are cast. That passes 7-0. Thank you. Next, I'll open the public hearing on Council Bill 19001, an ordinance rezoning certain land within the City of Arvada AAA inflatable from City of Arvada B2 General Business to CCA Clear Creek Subdistrict A, and amending the official zoning maps of the City of Arvada, Colorado, 5610 Lamar Street. And this was an item we continued from January 28, 2019. Mr. Devon.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Planning Manager Rob Smetana will begin this presentation.
As mentioned, the applicant is requesting a rezone from B2 to CCA in order to allow for outdoor storage related to the business that is currently operating on the property. The site is located at the northeast corner of 56th and Lamar, and the applicant is not proposing to make any physical changes to the aspect of the business other than adding fencing to the outdoor storage area should the rezoning be approved. The rezoning request does comply with all of the standards of the Land Development Code, and therefore staff does recommend approval of the project based on the approval criteria found in the Land Development Code. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the rezone at their December 18th meeting, and we have received the signed posting log and mailing affidavit, and they are in order. The applicant is in attendance for presentation or to answer questions, and we also have John Moore, planner, on staff if you have any questions for him.
Very good. Any individual that intends to testify in this matter, if you'll raise your right hand. Okay, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give in these proceedings will be truthful? Very good. You're the applicant? Okay, if you'll come forward. And you're Judith? Very good. State your name and sort of what you're asking for here.
Judith Shotgun, I'm asking for the rezoning of our business that turned out. It was in an industrial park, but it was Zone B2. We weren't aware of that, so we're just asking for that change now.
Good. Is there any other member of the public that would like to address City Council? If not, I'll close the public comment portion, open it up for City Council questions or action. Mr. McGough, you're first. Ms. Ford, you're second.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, I'd like to ask the applicant, just concerned about the screening on the north and primarily on the north side as it backs up to the property to the north. I notice now we have just a wire fence and some flags hanging from it. And what's the intent of fencing or screening on that north side?
Just protecting our property and keeping the traffic from coming through.
So will there be some privacy fencing placed there?
We were
Is that
told
the
we didn't
intent?
need the privacy at the last meeting. It will just be the chain link fence.
Just a chain link fence. So there, right now there's just, it's like a...
It's just a couple of cables, just to
couple
keep
cables with some flags on them.
Right.
So there'll be a chain link fence, but no other screening.
No, sir.
That's the intent. Okay. Okay, that's the only questions I have for now.
Okay, Ms. Ford? Okay. I see no other questions. Would entertain a motion. Mr. Marriott?
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that Council Bill 19-001, an ordinance rezoning certain land within the City of Arvada, AAA inflatable, from City of Arvada B2 General Business to CCA, Clear Creek Subdistrict A, and amending the official zoning maps of the City of Arvada, Colorado, 5610 Lamar Street, be approved on final reading, numbered 4672, and ordered published by title only. This motion is based on the findings of fact adopted by the Planning Commission.
Motions for approval. All votes are cast. That passes 7-0. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor.
Good luck with your continued business. Okay, we'll deal with the next 4 items together. We have the ratification and approval of Council Bill 2018-002, a resolution of the Planning Commission for the City of Arvada, Colorado, to amend the 2014 Arvada Comprehensive Plan land use. I'm sorry, this one, yes, these are all together. Designation pertaining to Carson Farms from suburban residential to medium-density residential, 6700 West 60th Avenue. Next one is Council Bill 19002, an ordinance rezoning certain land within the City of Arvada, Carson Farms, from City of Arvada R1, 1 and 2 family residences to PUDR, Planned Unit Development Residential, 6.62 dwelling units per acre, and amending the official zoning maps of the City of Arvada, Colorado, 6700 West 60th Avenue. Third one's Carson Farms Preliminary Development Plan, 6700 West 60th Avenue. And the final one is Carson Farms Preliminary Plat for 6700 West 60th Avenue. Mr. Devon.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Planning Manager Rob Smetana will lead this presentation off.
As mentioned, this is a request for approval for a comprehensive plan amendment, rezoning, preliminary development plan, and preliminary plat for an 18-unit paired home community. The site is located at the southeast corner of 60th and Pierce Street. The comprehensive plan amendment is necessary for this project as the applicant is proposing a density of 6.62 units per acre on the 2.72 acre property, which is above the current land use designation limit of 5 units per acre in the suburban residential district or suburban residential category. As part of the preliminary development plan, the applicant has also proposed modifications to building setbacks, lot size and width, maximum lot coverage, and maximum retaining wall height. The modifications requested are necessary to make the project work on this unique site, which is surrounded by a mix of uses located adjacent to a freight rail line and that requires extensive cleanup from the previous use. Staff does recommend approval of the project based on the approval criteria found in the Land Development Code, as the request complies with all of the criteria of the various actions before the council. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of all 4 cases at their December 18th meeting. The posting log and mailing affidavit have been provided and they are in order, and the applicant is in attendance for a presentation and questions, as is Jake Nichols, Senior Planner with the city.
Very good. We'll make the posting log and mailing affidavit part of the record. As I should have said for the first hearing, we'll make that correct the record to reflect that the posting log and mailing affidavit were a part of the record in item A as well. Any individual that wishes to testify on this matter, if you'll raise your right hand. Swear the firm that the testimony you're going to give in these proceedings will be truthful. Good. So we'll hear from the applicant first, and then I've got a couple people signed up, and others can pitch in if they would like. So if the applicant's ready to make their presentation.
Good evening. My name is Brad Eichman. I'm with MA Architects. Do you need the address?
Yes, please.
2329 West Main Street, Littleton, Colorado. Thank you, Rob, for the introduction on the project, and thank you, members of council, for letting me take the opportunity to present our project. We feel we have an excellent project, an excellent site plan, along with great architecture that will help this blighted area of Arvada. It's in much need of improvement, and we feel like we've got just the right project to do the job here. As Rob mentioned, on December 18th, we had our Planning Commission meeting. The project was approved then. There were some items that was discussed that it probably worth mentioning briefly. One of these items dealt with the type of product that was going to be built. I think there was a concern over the fact that we had paired homes designed for the project. It's worth mentioning that the current zoning does allow for that. And we're only asking for an increase, a slight increase in the density for this project. Another item that was brought up was regarding traffic and connectivity to the surrounding neighborhood. We did have a traffic report done, and it pointed out that there would be a nominal amount of traffic that would be entering and leaving the project in the peak hours. During the morning peak hours, around 2 vehicles would be entering the project and 6 vehicles would be leaving. Afternoon peak hour would be 6 vehicles entering the project and 4 vehicles leaving. Another item that was not in the traffic report but is worth mentioning is that the demographic for this project is set to be for retirees and empty nesters. We're anticipating even lower traffic counts because of this, and figures relating to that would be, an example of that would be for each household, empty nesters having approximately 2 cars during the peak hours, as opposed to a family type setting where you might be looking at 3 and 4 cars entering and leaving the project. As Rob mentioned, the retaining walls were a little bit of a concern. We are getting ready to make our final development plan submittal, and we will be showing fences on the project at these critical areas to help in the safety of the public areas. And the exact design of these fence areas is to be determined, but we're wanting it to blend in with the style of architecture that we have chosen for the project. Another item worth mentioning is that we added a little bit more landscaping just to the north. North is straight up on this particular plan, just north of Building B, and also to the south of Buildings G and H, to help serve, especially on the south end, to help serve a little bit more as a buffer to the area to the south. We appreciate the concerns the neighbors brought forth. We've worked our best to alleviate these concerns. We want to design a project, obviously, that's going to be successful and that will satisfy as many people as possible. And we believe we have, as I mentioned before, just the project to do this. This will be a quality, for sale, single-family attached project, and I'll open it up for questions if there are any.
Very good. We'll see if there's some members of the public that would like to address us, and then we'll perhaps have some questions for you. John Winkle, you're first.
All right.
Thank you very much. John Winkle, I'm 6118 Reed Way, and I do have some copies of my testimony here for council. I'd like to thank you for opening this up and taking public comment. I'm a member of our HOA board in the Cottonwood Ridge subdivision, which is 2 blocks northwest of the proposed Carson Farms development. As an HOA board, we opted not to take a formal position on this. Obviously, the property is blighted. Something does need to be done with it. But we do have a concern about increased traffic and the density of the development. And I would, in reference to the previous gentleman's comment, I would just point out that we have one board member that has done daily walks 2 times a day. He used to do them on 60th Street. He gave that up because of too many near misses, and specifically kind of the blind corner on 60th and Lamar And then sight lines also could be an issue on 60th and Pierce. So we would like to see that issue specifically addressed, and I don't know that it has been. If it's already bad, whether it's 2 cars or 4 cars or 6 cars, that seems like there is a problem there already. Beyond that, I would like to just say that personally, I have a concern about the way the City Council is approaching infill developments in general. Obviously, we're talking a density issue here with Carson Farms above code, but more importantly, we all know that infill is going to happen. There's going to be increased density. It's a question of how that's achieved. When we hear things like the 3-story development next to Breadwinners, the increased density here at Carson Farms, the apartment on the south side of the RTD line, that all of that impacts, the historic district there. And I really don't think that Arvada wants to become like Tennyson and the Berkeley area where, you see the existing structure of the city scraped off and new modernistic blocks put up without any thought about how to integrate that into a city aesthetic as a whole. And so I would commend that issue to your future deliberations, and want to thank you for your time, and certainly hadn't come with any expectation of talking about the Jefferson Parkway, but when we moved to Arvada a couple years ago, one of the things that we did look at was where the contamination plume was from Rocky Flats, and made sure that we were far away from it. I, again, personally would definitely not want to see the council do anything that could pose a health risk associated with the Jefferson Parkway.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I also have Cheryl Jacobs, who's signed up to speak.
Good evening, members of council. My name is Cheryl Jacobs. I live at 6219 Otis Street. Whereas I agree with other neighbors, the Carson Farm proposed development would create too much density and too much traffic, I now realize the application is about much more. It's a clarion call for Arvada to examine what works and what does not work for our neighborhoods, and add these things to the discussions within the recently merging Community and Economic Development departments and unfolding within Arvada's Land Development Code Reform Project. As Arvada re-examines existing zoning districts and restructuring public outreach, I point to the Carson Farms October 16, 2017 required neighborhood meeting. Just 3 members of the community were present. I offer this as an example of what does not work. And I'd urge council to lean in favor of LDC rewrite language to increase rather than decrease the need for public notification and public hearings. Arvadans should be very cautious of an allowed by right blanket rezoning category under only administrative, not neighborhood review. Regarding this PUD, the applicant is requesting decreased setbacks and increased retaining wall heights from 4 feet to 6 feet. Any walls around this property, let alone 6 feet high, would serve to create the feel of an isolated barrier community and take away our country feel of Pierce Street and 60th Avenue. As the LDC rewrite looks to fill open suburban Arvada land with mixed housing, walling off developments within once open and cohesive neighborhoods defeats quality of life goals. With Carson Farms, I'd ask council to deny the request to increase the wall height, limiting it to no more than 4 feet. With all due respect, what needs to change within the city of Arvada to prevent years of citizen complaints and code enforcement violations of an acreage near the city center from becoming blighted, sold for the cost of some single-family homes, possibly rezoned, and developed in a way in which some planning commissioners characterize under paraphrase as at a density which may be burdensome to the neighborhood. I'd ask the property owner to now commence with at least a surface area cleanup of this property to remove debris and trash, and as a deeper cleanup is planned, please consider all measures to ensure worker and neighborhood safety, as staff reports indicate there is general uncertainty of what may be uncovered. And I can provide a comment or a copy of this for the city clerk, but I also want to add a point of clarification on traffic counts. And I would ask the developer to clarify that, because what I read from the traffic consultant is that they would anticipate 132 vehicle trips per day. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you. And just give the city clerk a copy of your testimony if you would like. Any other member of the public that would like to address City Council on this topic? Okay, seeing none, I'll open it back up for the applicant for any additional evidence and rebuttal. And then we'll close public hearing and take questions from council.
Thank you. With respect to the gentleman from the HOA group to the north, one of his concerns was regarding the street width and the connectivity. I think he spoke to the general concern about the street width and the sidewalks in the area. And it's shown on the plan here. Again, north is straight up, 60th Avenue, going left to right, Pierce Street, going north-south to the left. And we are adding sidewalks to the north end of the right-of-way area to the north, as well as to the west along Pierce. And 60th Avenue will be widened toward the well, for most of that area in front of the project, the 60th Avenue will be widened. So we are making improvements, which we believe will help with traffic and with the connectivity for the sidewalks and the pedestrians in the neighborhood. Regarding his comment about density, I think I heard the term scrape off and just a general concern regarding this type of project. I guess technically you could view it as a scrape off. I wouldn't necessarily be putting it in that same category as maybe some of the other areas of town that people might think of when they hear that term. We've chosen an architectural vernacular for this project that we're calling a modern farmhouse style. And we've carefully detailed these buildings in a way which we feel will blend in with the neighborhood. This area of Arvada obviously has a history of rural style architecture, and we wanted to design a project that would blend and complement the area. Excuse me. Regarding Cheryl's comments on the density and the traffic and the walls, one thing in the traffic, the density, again, we are asking for a slight increase from 5 dwelling units per acre up to 6.62 dwelling units per acre. We've done this in a way where we've spread these buildings out throughout the site. We've kept them low in scale, to blend in with the area. We could have had fewer buildings with a larger scale. We just did not want to go down that route with that style of land plan or architecture. So we feel that the density is appropriate for this style of project with a paired house setting. Regarding the walls, we do have, it's a little hard to see, but the dark lines on that plan indicate retaining walls. Most of the walls, I'd say the majority of the walls are probably 4 feet or less. We do have north of building B there is a wall adjacent to the sidewalk that will be close to it's under 6 feet, but it'll be close to 6 feet for a good portion of that wall. We are doing our best to soften these areas with increased landscaping and fencing. We don't feel that it's going to be an eyesore the way this site grades from a high point from the north to the south. You can kind of picture how it might just terrace down throughout the site here. That's probably the most abrupt change would be from the sidewalk area down to the buildings on the north. But again, we're softening this with the landscaping, and we feel that it's going to be appropriate in scale and aesthetics. The traffic counts that Cheryl mentioned, the 132 vehicle trips on it, it would be an average weekday. Okay, that's worth mentioning that about half, 66, would be entering and half exiting the site during a 24-hour period. Okay, and then that breaks down, as I mentioned previously, into the peak hours, where during the morning peak hours, we would have approximately 2 vehicles would be entering and about 6 vehicles exiting. And in the evening, 6 vehicles would be entering and 4 vehicles would be exiting. Any questions?
We'll close the public testimony portion and open it up for city council questions.
Okay.
Mr. McGough, you're first.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, to the applicant, could you just remind us again the increased width of 60th Avenue in front of the proposed development, and the width of the sidewalk, and I guess I would say the fact that it's a detached sidewalk. So could you tell us about that, the width of the street, how much increase, and what the width of the sidewalk is? One of the first comments had to do with pedestrian movement in that area.
Yes, yes. I would defer to our civil engineer, if I may, and
sure.
Gary.
Make these people earn their keep. So.
Yeah, Gary Arvada with Manhart Consulting, 7600 East Orchard Road, Greenwood Village, Colorado. In regards to the additional right-of-way that's being added to 60th Avenue, we will be adding an additional 10 feet. And within that 10 feet, we'll have a 5-foot tree lawn and then a detached 5-foot sidewalk.
So basically, the increased width is consumed by the tree lawn and the sidewalk?
Correct.
Okay. And I had a question then, too, about the walls, and perhaps you're the one to answer that. It was indicated that there was a need for a fairly substantial wall, close to 6 feet, to the north of property, or the tract B there. How much wall will be on the south end? Is there any on the south end? It seems to be quite a drop in elevation from north to south.
Correct. On the south end, we were able to make up grade with buildings H, G, and F. Those are walkouts.
Okay.
So that's how we're able to.
So the walkout, the sketches that we saw, that will compensate for the change in grade.
Correct.
There. And so there's not a need for walls on the south side.
There is a wall in the southwest corner in the open space track there, and that's more so for an aesthetic wall, a seat wall. It'll be 2-3 feet in height, just to give that area some interest.
Okay. Okay, that's the only questions I have. Thank you.
Ms. Miller?
Sorry, I thought Mark was going to ask I'm sorry, Mr. McGough, I thought you were going to ask my question and you didn't. So you have a piece of your wall that goes up to almost 6 feet. What's the purpose of that? I'm trying to find it in here. I can't find what the purpose of increasing that wall so high.
So with the site, its grade goes from 60th and drops down to the south to the rail yard area, or the railroad tracks. There's quite a bit of drop there, and our entrance in our road there is at a 5% grade. So when you put a flat building that is parallel to that, you will have to make up the grade there from 60th down into the site, and that's where we're creating that one wall that's just under 6 feet in height.
Thank you. And I know that it was talked about in the Planning Commission, but if you could answer it for us too, that would be great. Just worried somebody might fall off that wall. You mentioned there would be fencing in the next drawing, but I just want to make sure that nobody's going to fall off.
Correct. So all retaining walls that are 30 inches and higher will have a fence or a handrail constructed on top of those for safety. And then additionally, up along 60th Avenue, with some of the plantings along 60th there, will help discourage people from wandering too far to the south there.
So that I'm clear on this retaining wall issue, from the north side looking south, how tall does the retaining wall appear to be? My assumption is that most of the height is going to be from the backyard of Building B.
Correct. You will not see the retaining wall from 60th.
Okay, so it's not like we're building a fortress with high walls around it.
Correct.
It's actually a in-ground retaining wall.
Correct. So yes.
Does that help explain it to folks? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Ms. Miller, did you have any other questions? Mr. Jones, you're next.
I'm not as quick as the mayor on the wall thing. So it's still, though, I'm going to just pick up where we left off on the wall. It's still, it's in ground, but how much from ground level to the top of the wall? It's obviously over 36 inches or whatever how much will be visible?
From the 60th Avenue side, you will not see it. You'll see the fence that sits on top of it. So the person that will see the wall is the individuals in Building B, looking out in their backyard.
Okay, so, but I thought I heard that the wall was going to be, so the backyard is facing 60th?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So are we putting a fence or a handrail on top of the retaining wall?
It'll be a fence.
And what does the fence look like?
We're finalizing the design of the fence. We're considering anything from a white picket type fence. It won't be a tall fence. It'll be, probably 42 inches, 48 inches tall. And something that'll fit in with the vernacular of the neighborhood and the style of the architecture.
So we're going to have a 4-foot stone wall and then a 4-foot.
No.
That's correct, yes. And again, as an example, since we've been discussing Building B, that is on the low side of the retaining wall. That's where you'll notice the retaining wall especially. You'll see the fence on top of it, and then, as Gary pointed out, from 60th Avenue, from the sidewalk, the pedestrians will notice the fence.
So if I'm standing on the 60th, trying to look into the backyard, visually, what am I going to see?
You're going to see the landscaping just on the south side of the sidewalk there, and then behind the landscaping, right on the edge of the wall, the retaining wall will be the fence, the pickets type style fence. So standing on the sidewalk, you'll see landscaping in front of you and the fence, and then after that, it drops off to the low side of the yard for building B.
Okay.
But the fence, excuse me, it's worth noting that the fence, we've got planned on using that, as I mentioned, as to show off the vernacular of the architecture. It'll extend in front of Building A, Building B, Building C, and then portion of Building D. So traveling along 60th, you'll see that fence, and it'll.
But it's not a 6-foot stockade fence?
No.
It's,
No, sir.
okay.
Okay. So I couldn't, and maybe it's just because I couldn't find it, but I couldn't find the traffic study and the report. Was that provided to us, or was that?
No, the traffic study was not provided with the plan set. It was just the drawings.
Okay. So, and I don't know who the right person is to answer this question, but on 60th Avenue between Lamar and Pierce, what's the traffic count? Peak counts on that?
I don't have the exact traffic counts on 60th Avenue, but this report did analyze the increase in traffic. It is currently working at an acceptable traffic level of service, and it will continue to do so with this development added in.
So what's acceptable?
Better than a D, I think.
Yeah, level of service A or B is considered acceptable.
All right, so I don't understand that. What does that mean?
So that's a level of service that's established by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and it's based on a multitude of information that the traffic engineers analyzed in detail for this project. So I can't give you an exact number. There's no exact number that says a level of service A would be this many cars. But they did do the analysis and run the traffic analysis on that project. Before development and post-development, in both cases, it was a level of service B, which is considered adequate for Arvada.
Okay, I wish I was a traffic engineer.
So it starts at B and stays at B?
Correct.
Okay.
But, so again, I guess just to follow up on that, what's the number of cars in that segment? What's to be acceptable? So if is it 100 cars a day? Is it 500 cars a day? Where does it change?
Councilmember Jones, Bert Knight, Public Works Director. I don't know off the top of my head for local roadway, connector roadway like that, but it's probably going to be up closer to 10,000 cars a day.
See, you can tell I'm not a traffic engineer.
Can travel through that area. That would be typical.
So in that segment B or whatever, however it was stated, there's a belief that maybe acceptable is 10,000 cars a day?
Yes, sir.
And the traffic study didn't specifically state that?
The traffic report stated it had capacity. It stated the increase was 132 vehicle trips per day, as calculated.
With the addition of this?
With the addition of this project.
It's going to add 132 trips per day in and out of this development.
Yes.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out what we're adding to.
So if the level of service B is approximately 10,000 trips across 60th, this project would increase that by 132 vehicle trips.
Okay.
If that makes
1%.
So 1%.
Right, but I didn't have the number, so I can't do the math. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Pfeiffer, you're next.
All right, let's get to parking. No one ever said anything about parking. One pet peeve I have is it's always interesting to put parking where everyone has access to parking, like driveways, but then we don't put parking where no one has access to any parking or driveways. So like on your buildings F, G, how do you think you have enough off-street parking there to support? Because you said you had 6 driveways. I see where the driveways are, but I also see that we put parking next to the ones that have driveways. So any reason, because I could, knowing we've done this a few times, I know this will turn into a nightmare. We'll get the complaints. Everyone's parking in the street. No one's using their garages. Garages are now storage units. So how do you think we're gonna deal with some of those complex, in a very dense situation for a small property?
Sure, that was an item we worked through with Jake during the, I believe it was the second submittal process, the second submittal time frame. And I guess to start out, I should probably summarize what our parking is and what is required. We have 18 dwelling units. We have, each of those dwelling units has an attached 2-car garage. Okay, that's 36 spaces. We have driveway spaces in front of some of these dwellings, not all of them, because you need an 18-foot minimum depth to qualify as a parking space. Okay, 12 of those spaces qualify. So far we've got 36 plus 12, and then we have an additional 6 spaces scattered throughout for a total of 54. So that is what we have currently, and we felt that adding the surface parking at would be the west end of Building H, also on the, it's on the north side of Building E, and let's see, 3 on the west side of H and 3 on the north side of E. So that's where we currently have the spaces.
So it's nice that there's a number you're meeting, but it doesn't always make common sense when you're looking at who you're targeting, right? You're targeting seniors. And so if I'm in F, what do you think is the safest way for me as a senior to go visit my friends in F? So I'm 70 years old. I'm visiting my 60, 70, 80-year-old friends in F. I pull in, tell me where am I going to park and how am I going to safely go into that building to visit my friends?
Well, I guess the choices would be either on the north side of E or on the west side of H.
Okay.
Or arranging to have a vehicle switched out with one of the garage spaces at that point in time in advance.
So you think it's okay for me to park north of E? There's no sidewalk that connects to the south side of E, but so I will have to walk in the street around the building down to get to F.
That would be one choice, yes.
And it's snowing. I'm just telling you, it's not first rodeo. It just doesn't make sense to me because you're telling me this is for senior living or older population.
Empty nesters,
and we've
yes.
had, this is not first rodeo around paired homes and townhouses and parking.
Yeah,
I think that if you told me, oh, these are millennials jumping in here and they're going to be affordable and these are $100,000 paired homes. Yeah, well, maybe that's a little bit different story, but they could probably take a walk around the block to get there. I don't think that your story is telling me that this is helpful for the community you're trying to target. So is there any way that parking could be closer to F, since F, G, H don't have driveways? I know that there's some parking next to H, so that probably doesn't quite work out. I mean, it's fine, but I think F and G, it's not an easy way to get there unless I park in the fire lane.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. We had one scenario where we did have parking at the end of the lane in front of Building F. That just so happens to be the access down to the drainage. It's an easement, for lack of a better summary here of the terms, and it goes down into that drainage area to be maintained. So we had to get rid of that. We had to maintain a certain width for the easement, and we couldn't make parking work there.
So if you had maybe one less building, would that have been easier to do some of this stuff?
Sure, that would have been an option, but that would have put the project in it just wouldn't have made the project work with the current numbers.
Financially it wouldn't, but you're asking for a change in the zone, setbacks, lot size and width, maximum lot coverage, and maximum retaining wall height. So quite a few exceptions to make
Yes.
this work.
Yes, these are challenges we face with the medium density residential type projects, and
But it's not zoned for medium yet until we approve it. Is that correct? It's low density.
but it's still for paired homes. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, currently.
That's all the questions I have.
Okay, Mr. Marriott.
Thank you. I had a question very similar to Mr. Pfeiffer's about how many less units would it take for this to comply with the density requirement?
I believe right now we are to where we could have done 14, I believe, 14 paired units.
Seven buildings consisting of 14
Yes.
units total instead of 9, so you'd be talking about 4 units, 2 buildings or 4 units?
Yes.
Okay. And so what was there had to be some, overriding reason why you decided to design it with 9 and 18 versus what complied with the standard there? What was that?
The big factor to make the project work is a good portion of the cost is for the cleanup of it being a blighted area. And just to make the project work, that's where the numbers had to be.
And so when you say cleanup of a blighted area, what are you referring to? What are you going to go out and do that's that cleanup of a blighted area?
Well, I would probably defer to the owner. He's very much got his finger on exactly what needs to be done there.
My name is Brady Hyde, 4615 South Tech Link Circle. And I'm currently the owner of the property. So to your question there, great question. As far as adding the 4 additional units, I think we're back here in front of Sierra Planning Commission, maybe a year and a half ago or such, running this scenario to make sure it would be worth our efforts. And so when he's referring to blighted area, I'm not sure if you've driven by the site or taken a peek at the site. It was extensive time, energy, effort, and legal proceedings to get the past gentleman off the property, which I think was a solid 6 to 8 months. And now we've just here, probably in the last 2 months, been able to get it fenced, to get him off the property and get it fenced. And when I allude to extensive work, much cooperation with Arvada police, SWAT, things of that nature. So it was not a safe area. I think one of the residents had mentioned some of the things that were taking place on the property and making sure that we clean it up properly. I think that was touching on, I guess, the condition of the property and why we chose to go this route. And it is to make it economically feasible. Those 4 units are very important.
Okay. Let me ask it a little bit different way.
Yeah, please.
What is the cleanup you're required to do? We hear this, remediate the blight or clean the property up, but I haven't heard any specifics about what you're going to do. And I know there's a structure on there now, but anytime you redevelop, removing a structure is one of those things to be expected. And of course, you'll be moving some dirt around, but anytime you develop land, that's to be expected. In looking at a satellite photo of the area around there, there's both, some older homes that have been there for a while, as well as some new developments right here around there. And my assumption is they had to do some of those things similarly as well. Or is there something actually unique about what you're having to do that the properties around you did not have to do?
It was essentially a salvage yard. I can't speak to how many tons of debris. I believe that we still have an abandoned excavator to contend with. So it was essentially campers, cars, abandoned things, just a lot of that. So other properties we've purchased along the way, we haven't had to do that, nor have we had to go through the legal proceedings to be able to achieve such. So that was part of it as well.
Yeah, I think it might be useful to get staff to give some input on I don't know if everybody remembers, this was one of our problem properties
This was Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this was a property that the former tenant called Rancho Universe. He was burying campers, trailers, heavy equipment, lots of debris on that property. We had an extensive code enforcement case that ran over multiple years in order to evict the person from the property. When the gentleman talked about the fact that we had a SWAT call out to evict the individual that was on that property, he is absolutely right. We had a SWAT call out because there was some concern about potential weapons and other forms of other items on that property that could have caused harm to both our police officers as well as the neighboring community. And we had court proceedings. The county sheriff was involved as far as an eviction was concerned. So this was an extensive process to get this individual off the property, and there was a lot of debris that has been removed. There continues to be debris that has to be removed in order to go ahead and get this property redeveloped. In terms of describing it as a blighted property, I think that's an absolutely accurate description.
Okay, so does that mean your answer is that the economic reality is why you've got to have more density is for economics?
There was a great cost associated with some of the items you just broached, yes.
Right. Okay. All right, let me move on to a little bit different subject. So the sidewalk that's going to be on the west side looks to me like it stops at the railroad tracks where Pierce crosses the railroad tracks. But yet I see the property that when it was redeveloped on the west side of Pierce Street, that sidewalk went down to the railroad tracks, but then across and joined up with the sidewalk on the south side. And it looks to me like there's a similar opportunity here on the east side of Pierce Street. I'm not sure whether this is a question for the staff or for the applicant, but does this project make that connection to the sidewalk that's south of the railroad tracks on the east side of Pierce Street, or does this project leave that gap there to do?
Yeah, this project does stop at the railroad tracks right of way. That would be an off-site requirement, which it's more difficult to require off-site improvements for developments. There are specific there's specific standards must be met that the Supreme Court's handed down. So we didn't feel that having them do that, go through the PUC to get permission and really rose to the level of the impact that's generated by the development.
Okay.
But it's something that we could definitely look into. We could also look into some sort of fee that would contribute to a future connection. Fee
in lieu of or something. If you look at the satellite photo, it's pretty dramatic. It's pretty eye-opening. I guess I understand the economic realities here, but with development comes the opportunity to make those valuable connections and not leave the city of Arvada with another missing segment of sidewalks that we try so hard to deal with over time when our finances allow. And this would seem like a natural place to eat one of those up in the process of development. To me, I guess I really don't have any concern whether the applicant were to pay for that or whether the city were to pay for that, but just that missing sidewalk chunk were to be dealt with now as opposed to just left as another missing connection to be dealt with at some time in the future. What would you think about, you're asking for an economic reality of needing density that's not allowed, although I see properties around you that have redeveloped without needing that, about making some things for the community better, like those sidewalk connections. To me, that's...
I don't think we're necessarily opposed to it. As Jacob touched on, I think it was just more trying to collaborate with the PUC over the railroad track easement. Gets to be maybe a little challenging, but I'm not opposed to it if it's not a showstopper by any means. So it's not the cost, I think, that was really the deterrent. I think it was maybe more the process.
Right.
So, okay. But no, not opposed to that. I think it would add to the development.
Right. Okay. I think that's the questions I have for now. Sure. Thank you very much.
Ms. Ford.
So I have a question for Rob. In Ms. Jacobs' letter, she mentions urban and density. Could you tell me, please, what density is considered urban?
We don't actually have a designation in the comprehensive plan that's urban. We have suburban, which is up to 5 units to the acre, and then medium density, which is what they're requesting, which will be 5 to 12 units to the acre.
So in your opinion, as a planner, is that considered urban to you?
It does depend on the situation. In most cases, urban would be much higher than even 12 units to the acre. If you're looking in, Denver, for example, you're talking in the 60 and 70 units per acre is common in the downtown area.
Okay. I have a question for the developer. So on building F, you don't have any landscaping behind that building. What was the intention there?
I may defer that, excuse me, I'm sorry. I may defer that to our civil engineer on that. I believe there was just some restrictions there with proper distance between the back and the easement.
So building F is adjacent to a sanitary sewer easement, and there is a sanitary sewer line that's, I think it's about 8 feet away from the building. So we would be planting a landscape within the city easement, which isn't allowed. So additionally, as you can see, building F, we really don't have much of an opportunity to move it to the north due to other constraints.
And then just for my understanding of this drawing, so for example, on building B, where you have the 2 driveways, one with the cars pointing in one direction and one with the cars pointing in another direction, does that mean then that in building B on the left-hand side, as we're facing it, they do not have a garage? Why are the cone shapes going the opposite direction? What does that represent? The triangle shapes.
Yes, excuse me. Those would represent the vehicles, and for instance, I'll show you building B. This is building B, building type 1, and the lower right-hand corner would be that particular elevation. The unit on the right, you can clearly see the garage doors there, okay? Just to the left of that is the garage for the next unit, but it is a side-loaded garage. So those garage doors appear on the next elevation to the left of that particular elevation. So many of these are side-loaded garages, many of them are front-loaded. That helps meet certain standards, design standards, as well as the just providing the good aesthetics for the architecture.
Okay, so go back to the previous slide that showed the looking down. Okay.
Oh, okay. But are you driving into a garage right now? Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
Get your question answered? Good. Great.
And just going back to the fence again, so could you tell me specifically from the ground level to the top of the fence, how tall are we looking at?
Depends on if you're talking about the ground level on the high side of the retaining wall or the low side of the retaining wall.
The high side.
The high side, it would be approximately just under 4 feet.
Under 4 feet.
3.5 to 4 feet tall.
So if I'm walking on the sidewalk.
Yes.
Next to me would be a 4-foot fence.
Not immediately next to you, but there'll be some plantings, some landscaping to soften that area, and then the fence would be right at the wall.
Okay.
Yes.
And then in terms of what's in the ground, has there ever been a study done as far as anything hazardous other than, vehicles and things like that?
Sure, great question. There's been an environmental phase 1 done, and I believe that has been shared with Jake. So yes, there was environmental phase 1 done, and from what I guess there was nothing nothing real grave at this point that we've noticed or that was surfaced during that environmental phase 1.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yep, thank you.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
Hey, real quick. So you said there's been some work, Mr. Devon, on the property. Has that been done by us or by the applicant?
The work that's been, some work's been done by the applicant, I believe, and some work has been also done by the, some of by the former tenant.
Okay, the former owner,
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
Okay, so we didn't accrue any costs associated to any of the mitigation that's taken.
So
off
far, other than pretty extensive enforcement costs.
Yeah, right.
Well, obviously, when you have a SWAT call out, that's more than a couple of code enforcement people going out. So other than that, we have not accrued any significant
Okay.
costs.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Marriott?
Thank you. I have a question for staff, and I'm not sure who's the right staff person to ask it, but I'm inclined to try to figure a way to get this sidewalk connection either done or paid for as part of this development, and I don't really have a particular interest in one over the other. But if we were going to do that and make this approval conditional on that, one, is that the right way to do it? Number one, and number two, how would we do that without unnecessarily burdening the applicant? You know, making sure it's a cost that's reasonable to the project, but yet something that's meaningful that can achieve, you know, this sidewalk connection.
Mr. Marriott, I believe we can work with the applicant to figure out a way to make that connection.
Okay.
There might have to be a shared cost or something along those lines to make that happen. But if it's important to the city council, we will figure out a way to make that happen.
Okay. And so I guess this question would be then for Mr. Daly, if we were going to do that, would that be included in a motion to approve?
That'd be an additional
approve that,
condition.
And the condition just be that the applicant work with the city to achieve this connection, or would we want to put an actual hard condition on it, or what? How would the city like to see that?
If council wants it done, I would put a hard condition and leave the details between the staff and the applicant as to how that's going to happen.
Okay.
So working with the staff is one thing, because there's a different definition of what that means.
Right.
But if you want it done, then I would make it a hard condition, and then it'll be up between the city manager and his staff and the applicant to figure out how that's going to happen.
Figure out how to do that.
And I would just add to Mr. Daly's comments that you could put a hard condition on me to figure out how to get that done.
Right, okay. And so I guess I would then want to ask the applicant, because I wouldn't want to just lay a condition on you without your input. Is that something that is doable by you guys? Is that something you feel you can adequately accomplish with our city staff to make that happen?
As far as I'm concerned, absolutely. Do you see any conditions? It's more just asking if there's any conditions with the site that he would see that grades or anything along those lines.
No, I mean, I guess the property that is to the south of the railroad tracks, I'm not sure what the condition is with their property on that site, since there doesn't appear to be any sidewalk in front of a portion of their site, whether that's in right-of-way or if we need to obtain sidewalk easements. I mean, we would need help from the city.
But if it just was that even some fee were paid or escrow were paid towards that sidewalk, not necessarily making you guys accomplish that sidewalk, because obviously I can understand the difficulties with that's something that you could live with and would improve your development.
I mean, if that helps,
okay,
you guys go ahead with it, then absolutely. And I think it'd be a nice condition for the site.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. One more question, Mr. Pfeiffer, before I get to start.
I know, sorry, Mayor. I want you to have the last word. So on the parking situation, we require 30, I don't know who I'm looking at, somebody over in this area, 36 parking off-street. Do we require garage parking? So if these had no garages, what would be our parking requirement for on?
Our parking, off-street parking requirements for duplexes are the same as single family, it's 2 off-street spaces. It doesn't define whether they're in a garage or on a driveway. They can be either or in the current code.
So they could be either or.
Yeah, they could be in a garage, or if they just had a long driveway or a wide driveway, they could provide 2 driveway spaces, and that would also meet the 2 spaces per.
So the 2 spaces for, for each unit?
Yes.
And then how much, is there any requirement for off-street at all?
Sorry, that is off-street spaces.
That is off-street,
There's
too.
no requirement for guest parking for single family or duplex. It is strictly the 2 off-street spaces per unit.
Well, if you're willing to deal with him, can you willing to deal with me? Can we move some parking spots closer to F?
So I think
one thing I'd like to point out is there isn't a sidewalk along HG and F, but that was one of our requirements in our comments, that they do have to do better pedestrian connectivity within the site. So we do expect them to provide sidewalks, so you would be able to get on the sidewalk from the 3 spots located between H and I, and you'd be able to get all the way down to F via a sidewalk.
So we'll have a sidewalk, but we have to walk double the distance from E.
You have to walk a little further.
Can we put a sidewalk by E over to F?
That one would be tougher because of the space around the driveway on the north side.
How if we get rid of E? Wouldn't we have plenty of room, and then all this stuff would go away and all these exceptions? Wouldn't that just make it really simple? Anyways, you don't need to answer that. That was a loaded question. So you're going to ask for sidewalks to be put there?
Correct. That was a condition of approval in our last review.
Okay, and is there going to be any requirements that their garages don't turn into storage?
Is there an HOA?
Yeah, is there an HOA?
as of right now, we do not intend to do an HOA.
So no HOA to enforce anything or to clear the sidewalks?
There'll be common maintenance, lawns, snow, things of that nature.
So how are you going to enforce collecting assessments to maintain the property and the 6-foot wall?
There's different legal mechanisms, one being an HOA, one being common elements or common services, if you will. Sometimes the HOA, I guess I don't want to speak too in depth of the legalities of it, due to some of the construction litigation. Sometimes the HOA, it can be more burdensome than the doing,
So how's the property being maintained?
If I may step in, there will be an HOA. That is a requirement. We do not
wasn't aware of that.
typically allow party wall agreements for these type of developments. That has been talked about throughout the development review process. They have tracks, they have underground detention, they have the common shared drive in the middle that are all in tracks that have to be under ownership. So that will be a requirement.
Okay.
I apologize, I was not aware of that, so thank you.
You know about
Sorry.
this? Now
Yeah,
that's a burden, right?
It is what it is now. So yes, no, absolutely. It's, I apologize, Jake. So, yep, so there will be an HOA.
All right, this is a crazy testimony. So we are going to have an HOA, so that means we'll have a single trash company in here. And then we will have a wall that will be maintained by this common owner. And everything will be maintained, sidewalks will be cleared and cleaned, all right? I mean, I'm just a little nervous with the testimony tonight that if we're prepared for this type of proposal. So anyways, thank you, Mayor, for entertaining me.
You are entertaining. For staff, the proposed parking meets our requirements at this point?
It exceeds our requirements.
Exceeds our requirements.
Correct.
There's no exceptions being sought with regard to parking, right? Okay.
That is absolutely correct.
How many buildings are on the property right now?
There's one primary structure, and there's, I think, one or portions of multiple other accessory structures, but there was one home.
Okay, so from a scrape-off perspective, we're not scraping off a bunch of single-family bungalows to build the Tennyson Street monstrosities?
No.
Okay. For the applicant and actually the owner, first of all, you weren't the owner that had the tenant there, are you?
No.
Just want to make, you've acquired the property subsequent to what went on there. So you're not the bad actor in terms of what was going on, or you weren't allowing the bad actor in terms of a tenant.
No, we worked extensively to get him removed, and it
Okay.
took quite some time.
When you talk about that in terms of the expenses to remove, were those expenses you incurred, or are you talking about what the city had to do in terms of the?
Myself.
Okay, after you acquired ownership of the property?
A little bit before and after, mostly after,
Okay.
a little bit before.
To get him off the property?
Yeah.
To cause the lease to be?
Just to give you an idea, so that I think it took from the time we started to the time we finally got him off with the eviction, I mean, a year, approximately 1 full year, legal proceedings,
Okay.
all sorts of not ideal.
And you've incurred the
processes.
expense of cleanup to date?
There's still, yes, we've done some cleanup, and there's still plenty left to do. You know, it's tough to put a number on. We fenced it. Haven't necessarily walked the site in search of what can be buried or not buried. As he had mentioned, he was fond of excavating. He was fond of playing in the dirt, and we're probably going to have some things present themselves underneath the surface.
As I recall, there's a bunch of mounds out
Yes.
there and just
Yep.
a lot of interesting issues to be dealt with.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, I don't have any other questions. I would entertain any motions that council wishes to put forward at this time. Mr. Marriott.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm gonna start by moving that CP 2018-0002, a resolution by the Planning Commission for the City of Arvada, Colorado, to amend the 2014 Arvada Comprehensive Plan land use designation pertaining to Carson Farms from suburban residential to medium density residential, 6700 West 60th Avenue, be ratified and approved. This motion is based on the finding of fact adopted by the Planning Commission. And I just want to make a quick comment on this particular motion. So the Planning Commission recommended this. I'm comfortable with it as well because the development plan includes a density that's very close to the minimum of this particular comprehensive plan designation. And so for that reason, I'll be voting yes on this one.
Okay, Mr. Pfeiffer?
Well, I don't know if it's which one to comment, but I'll make a couple, can I make comments on all these or no?
No, just
this one on the density, and the
yeah.
next one is in regards to rezoning, right? So the density, I struggled with your presentation to convince that these exceptions are warranted. I really did struggle. I think our staff has added more meat to your presentation than you all did. And, but I do know the property. We do have history with that property, and I understand the costs associated with such a property that could be, could create some extra cost than typically a open space, right, for an infill. So, I mean, for that reason, very closely, I'm going to go ahead and support this motion to move it to a density because of the same comments that Mr. Marriott said, which is it's at the low end of that proposal.
All votes are cast. And I wiped you out, so please vote again. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I want to make it very clear that I don't know what the votes are, so I don't wipe them out if I don't like the outcome. So all votes are cast. That passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Mr. Marriott, do you want to continue on with motions?
Thank you, Your Honor. Move that Council Bill 19-002, an ordinance rezoning certain land within the City of Arvada, Carson Farms, from City of Arvada RI 1 and 2 family residences to PUDR, Planned Unit Development Residential, 6.62 dwelling units per acre, and amending the official zoning maps of the City of Arvada, Colorado, 6700 West 60th Avenue, be approved on final reading, numbered 4673, and ordered published by title only. This motion is based on the finding of fact adopted by the Planning Commission.
Before we vote on this one, I need some legal input in terms of where would be the appropriate place to put in the requirement, which we've done on a lot of these on the PDP. Yeah. Okay. With regard to parking in garages. Okay, great. Okay. I need Mr. Jones and Ms. Ford to cast your votes. Those votes are cast. That passes 7-0. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. I move that Carson Farms Preliminary Development Plan, located at 6700 West 60th Avenue be approved subject to the attached updated condition of approval and the additional condition of approval that the sidewalk on the west side of the development along the east side of Pierce Street be either connected to the sidewalk on the east side of Pierce Street on the south side of the railroad track, or that the developer work with city staff to provide payment in lieu of in an acceptable version for the city staff.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
What about my garage issue and parking issue?
Off-
Is that amendment? Is
Off-
that a
Offer an
friendly-
amendment.
A friendly amendment to, now that they know they have an HOA, to enforce that their garages are not to be used for storage. I don't know if that's the right way we'll say that, but I think that's what we've done in the past in these tight situations.
Okay, do you accept that? Do you want to vote it on separately?
I guess I would prefer not to accept that as a friendly amendment. However, I'd love for you to make that as an amendment that we can vote on separately.
Okay, then I'll make it as amendment because of the parking situation. I think that we should enforce that those garages are used for vehicles, not for mass storage.
And we've had language like that we can utilize and provide to them for their input. Mr. Marriott, you wish to speak to that motion?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about that, and it's the reason why I chose to not accept it as a friendly amendment. I understand the concern there. I think that in this particular case, I'm not really that comfortable with the city of Arvada taking a position and telling people what to do within the walls of their domicile in this particular condition. In this particular case, they are providing nearly double the amount of parking that is required by our code. And granted, in some places it may be less than ideal, but I think the applicant stands to either win or lose on that based on who they choose to market this property to. And maybe it's a small issue, but I just don't like seeing us set up these types of issues where the city may become the enforcer of somebody having too much stuff in their garage at any one time or another. And so for that reason, I'm going to vote against the amendment, although I'm not necessarily against the concept of it. That I'm not very comfortable with those types of things.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment that's why you have an HOA and they'll enforce it. Just make sure 2 cars are in it. I don't care if it's junk all around the car. It just needs to be 2 cars are in the garage.
Or only have 1 car and you have the other one filled with junk.
Yep.
Mr. Jones, you want to speak to the motion to amend?
Yes, I think.
Well, that's what we're dealing with right now is the motion to amend.
To Mr. Marriott's motion to
No.
amend? To Mr.
No,
Pfeiffer's?
Mr. Pfeiffer's
Okay.
motion to amend.
We're on the same page.
Right.
And so, yeah, I guess I would look at it from the perspective of the cities are going to, under the way that it was detailed is that they are required to have an HOA. There are certain rules and regulations that the HOA puts out as a regular part of their documentation. They can choose what to say. I don't believe I would agree that that's not a city enforcement issue, but I think that we need to, and I don't know how much guidance we give on HOA legal documents, and so I would just caution that we don't do anything different than we've done with any other HOA or any other development that required an HOA, but allow them the flexibility to enforce how that they would enforce. And for that reason, I would accept Mr. Pfeiffer's amendment.
Okay, but his amendment is specifically to require language in the HOA documents.
So I would offer an amendment to the amendment. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that.
I may accept your friendly amendment.
What's that?
No, we've done this before, so
Yeah,
let's be consistent as a council.
Yeah.
There's been several places where we've had townhouses and where the parking is just not in favorable locations, and to make sure we keep that free for visitors and other things. I just want to stay consistent with what we've done with those other developers.
May I make a comment on this motion?
Yes, as soon as I get to Mr. McGough, and then you're next.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I will not be voting for the amendment related to parking think that's a matter to be dealt with through the rules of the HOA, not through the enacting ordinance here.
Okay, Ms. Ford?
I wanted to make a comment on the amendment because living in an HOA in a multifamily housing complex, I just today made a comment to my neighbor who is renting her condominium, and both of us made the comment that within 10 years there has been a tremendous change in the amount of parking spaces that are not available anymore. So I appreciate Mr. Pfeiffer's comments. I also appreciate his insight into looking at how people do travel within an HOA. And I agree with him that if this is a development for seniors, absolutely you have to consider how people get around the complex, because I live in a complex that at the time it was built probably had plenty of parking space, but does not anymore. And many people are parking on streets, and it's extremely inconvenient to walk around the complex. So I would actually vote in favor of the amendment.
Okay, so there are no more lights on to speak. You are now voting on whether or not to accept Mr. Pfeiffer's motion to amend, and then we'll deal with the underlying motion, either with the amendment if it's approved, or without the amendment if it's not approved. So please vote carefully. Ms. Miller and Mr. Jones, I need your votes as you are sitting there contemplating the meaning of life and all of these things. Okay, all votes are cast. This is the vote on the motion to amend. It passes 5-2 with Mr. Marriott, Mr. McGough voting no, all others voting yes. Mr. Marriott.
Thank you, Your Honor. So we'll go back to, to our original motion, which now is amended to require the HOA to not let people put stuff in their garages.
That's not exactly
whatever it is. So that's fine. So I just wanted to make sure my motion included that this motion is based on the findings of fact adopted by the Planning Commission with our amendments added to it, and then make a comment about this motion on the preliminary development plan and how I'm going to vote. So I am going to be voting yes. I am concerned that that really the only argument here for making this small, albeit small, density change is an economic argument. That normally that's not part of the land development code. However, I think the long history this property has is a problem property. I think also the redevelopment that's happened on essentially both sides, east and west of this property, and that this proposed development, while a little denser than both of those, is still very much in spirit like them and does fit in. And the thing that makes it okay for me to vote for this is the amendment that I added to this PDP, which is getting the sidewalk connectivity. So to me, I think that that's a fair deal for the residents of the area and the citizens of Arvada in general to accept a slightly higher density, very slightly higher, in exchange for more mobility and more connectivity. So for that reason, I will be voting yes.
To have a clarification from staff, the updated conditions require the internal sidewalks that were discussed earlier?
That is correct.
Okay, very good. Mr. Pfeiffer, you're next to speak.
So at a very rare occasion, I'm agreeing with Mr. Marriott.
Let the record so reflect.
Yes, please do. As you saw earlier, we did not agree, so it's always good to see democracy in action.
The beauty of this council is we can disagree agreeably.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now, I would say my amendment doesn't do a financial burden on you, so just wanted to say I will be supporting this effort for the same reasons that Mr. Marriott has given.
Staff is sitting there thinking, we get paid to come to these things. Mr. Jones.
Thank you. Yeah, the thing that is allowing me to support this is Mr. Marriott's amendment. Without that amendment, I would not have supported it. So I appreciate Mr. Marriott thinking about that and adding that as a condition for approval, and it's my hope that Mr. Devon, you're able to work that out however you do that. And so because of the amendment, I will be supporting this.
Ms. Ford?
Well, this area that we're talking about is an area that I know quite well because I used to work very close to the area and actually know a lot of the neighbors in the neighborhood. And I, never liked the look of that property, but at the same time, I found it very interesting that some of the neighbors actually liked that neighbor, and he wasn't such a bad person after all. So I just felt like I had to say something about that gentleman since there were so many disparaging comments made about him. But I have to say that I am pleased with the theme, if you will, of the buildings that you're building there. I think that they will go very well. And it does help me to vote yes for this project because of some of the amendments that were put on as well. I have to admit that when Mr. Pfeiffer talked about the walking around, that made a lot of sense to me. Living in an HOA, I know what those experiences are like directly. So I'm going to vote for it because, again, I think the density isn't too much more than what's there already. I'm not a lover of walls either, so I'm glad that it's not going to be too tall because I agree with Ms. Jacobs that usually when people put walls around things, they're trying to hide or separate it from the surrounding areas. But I appreciate the design of your buildings.
Mr. McGough.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think the minimal increase in density is acceptable for that particular piece of property, and we have the added benefit that we will be doing away, if this is approved, we'll be doing away with a seriously blighted piece of property. So I plan to vote in favor of the motion.
Then I need you to vote. Okay, all votes are cast. This is one where I am driven by a couple of things. First of all, we had public testimony in opposition, and frankly, to some extent, I have to look at the number of people who are testifying for or against. Certainly, we didn't have anybody other than the applicant testifying in favor, but we were not hearing from a large number of people. There weren't a large number of people at the neighborhood meeting, at Planning Commission, or at City Council. And while I would love to have a lot of public input on all issues, when we don't have a lot of public input, it tends to tell me that there's not too much concern and that people are generally okay with the concept, because we do put out notices, we do give people opportunity to give their input, and so without that, it tends to lean towards approval for me. I, like Ms. Ford, like the architecture. I do not view this as had been testified as a scrape off with putting up mini mansions like what we see along Tennyson Street and or other parts in the Berkeley area. So I'm not compelled to think that this is harmful. And certainly I agree with comments made by others in terms of the severely blighted condition of this property, and that for those reasons there was, even though we shouldn't be driven solely by economic considerations in terms of the viability of a project, that there are legitimate justifications in this case to warrant approval. I do appreciate the two amendments that have been made and think that they make it a better project. So it passes 7-0, and Mr. Marriott, if you'll do the last motion.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. But before I do, I'd like to ask Mr. Daly a quick question. With the preliminary plat, does that need to include the two amendments on the plat as well? Okay, thank you. So I move that Carson Farms preliminary plat, located at 6700 West 60th Avenue, be approved subject to the attached updated condition of approval and the two amendments which were offered tonight on the PDP, on the approval of the PDP. This motion is based on the findings of fact adopted by the Planning Commission.
All votes are all votes are cast. That passes 7-0. Thank you. Congratulations. We expect to see a good project here. We do ask that you work with staff with regard to the two amendments and certainly as to the updated conditions for staff in terms of the internal sidewalks, and we wish you best in making this a very good-looking project for our community. Thank you. Mr. Devon, when you and I met this morning, I thought we were having the bond issuance public hearing. That's not on the agenda tonight?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, that was last week.
Oh, that's
But,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
My apologies.
Well, you had it on our agenda this morning.
We
so-
talked about it, yes, and I made a mistake, sorry.
Nope, no problem, no problem. So that ends our public hearings. Now we'll go to public comment, and Mr., is it Rabi or Rabe? Robbie. Robbie, yes, Mr. Robbie.
I have a couple of handouts to give you to go along with Mr. Robbie's comments. May I approach?
Yes, you may.
Hand them to you? Thank you.
I appreciate you not starting a timer till I get down
Thank
here.
you.
I think I would have
No,
lost half
that's,
my
no,
time.
they started and then they reset it, so appropriately, so.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you. I'm part of a group called the Movement to Oppose Jefferson Parkway. We just recently formed. You heard from a couple of our members earlier today. We're different from the neighbors of the Parkway, which you heard from earlier that Brett is working with. There are a lot of reasons why we oppose the Parkway. One reason is that we feel strongly this tollway puts the welfare and safety of Arvada citizens at risk by directing traffic dangerously close to hundreds of homes in Leiden Rock. Now, we understand that in 2011, in exchange for the developer providing the land for the tollway, the City Council approved the Leiden Rock annexation and the residential plan that went along with it. That resulted in construction of hundreds of homes within 65 yards of the tollway. Now, you have this map here, and this is the map that is of the area I'm speaking to. And maybe what you haven't heard is that that is to the houses. That's not to the decks, it's not to the patios, it's not to the backyard fence, which is probably about 50 yards. While my home is not in this area, I'm still impacted by the tollway coming through Leiden Rock, and I still strongly oppose its construction as it's currently laid out. Now, we know most of you were not on the council in 2011. A couple of you were. At that time, was the council aware of the fact that the homes were going to be 65 yards close to the tollway or less? What was the discussion? And if so, why was it not changed? Why was this allowed to happen? For those of you who are on the council today, when did you become aware of this information? Was it just last year when Brett mentioned it in a meeting? Whether by approving the project 8 years ago or continuing to fund the authority and thereby the project today, this council would seem to demonstrate a lack of concern by putting hundreds of families in Arvada and their children and their property at a significant safety risk. So when you look at this map from north to south, this is downhill all the way from north to south because the top part is coming down from 72nd, Highway 72 and the railroad. So we're expecting speeds, even though the speed limit is projected to be 65, we're expecting speeds to hit 70, maybe even 75 miles an hour as it heads down. Trucks are going to have to downshift through this area. You see there's a curve as this starts to exit the housing development, and they're going to need to do that coming down at those speeds. Northbound, the cars and trucks are going to have to accelerate as they go up that hill. Both these things are going to create increased noise and pollution. And what guarantee do we have that vehicles or vehicle parts won't be flying into the backyards or houses of these homes? And what guarantee do we have that the property won't be destroyed by fires from vehicles or cigarette butts? Now, I happen to live not far off C-470 in Bowles for many years, and I can tell you that there were a number of fires caused by vehicles and cigarettes along C-470 between Morrison Road and Ken Carroll. I saw them in person, and I drove by them after they'd happened. If the fire starts, and you can, if you look at these pictures also that I provided to you, which I just took this, well, my wife took, obviously, this past weekend, the top four are just some pictures of how close the berm is to the backyard fences and therefore the houses. And the tollway is just on the other side of this berm. So you can imagine if a fire starts right around just on the other side of that berm, how quickly you can come over there and hit the wooden fences which lead directly to the houses. So look at the bottom two pictures. And this is at the north end of Leiden Rock. And you see that there is a pathway that's there that provides somewhat of a buffer between the homes and the berm, and therefore the tollway. Why isn't there the same thing going through this one section that I'm speaking to right now? It would help. It still wouldn't alleviate the concerns we have about how close the highway would be, but it would have helped. So many of you, I guess the question is, have you seen and walked through the property, the pathway that goes through these homes? If not, we'd be happy to give you a personal tour. So instead of putting the safety and lives of hundreds of Aurora families, homeowners, and their children at risk, this council can do the right thing by not approving the $2 million budget request, the additional budget request that's come from the Parkway. And I realize that's going to be coming up sometime in the next several weeks. So please protect the safety and property of hundreds of Arvada families. After all, who will protect us if not you? Thank you for your time. We hope you vote no when that comes up.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your input. Any other members of the public who would like to address City Council tonight? Seeing none, I'll close that second public comment portion and look for reports from the City Council. Mr. Pfeiffer.
I have one. So if some people might recall, there used to be a Transit Alliance Academy that used to go around, and I don't know how many people actually got to attend the Transit Alliance Academy, but I always thought it was a great academy before coming into City Council. As you may know, the Transit Alliance has shut down, and they folded the program into DRCOG. And it's basically an opportunity, it's a Citizens Academy where it gets you an opportunity to learn about topics like transportation, highways, and so forth, and why certain things happen and the way they happen, and how to better plan in urban planning. So it gives citizens an insight of how transportation is done. It's a couple weeks long. It's a certification, but you get to look at case studies and figure out how that works. Well, since DRCOG has taken that over, they have announced their next citizens call who are interested in participating. And I sent it to Mr. Devon, and I was hoping maybe we can put that up on our website and get some Arvadans out there. It used to be a good thing for folks coming into City Council or planning or any of our boards and commissions to attend Transportation Committee. So maybe if we can get that up on our website and get some folks that are interested in that, that would be great. And then the last thing is exciting news. In a week and a half, I'll be the chair of DRCOG, speaking of. So it's taken a long time to move through the ranks, but the organization is going in a good direction, and I'm excited to take that and represent some of the regional concerns. I know, Mr. Mayor, you and I will be having some conversations about what regionalism looks like from a transportation perspective, and I look forward to working with you actually in a different hat, in a different capacity, as representing the Mayor's Caucus. So I'm excited what's coming up next. And I appreciate all of staff support with DRCOG, all of you guys and gals. I mean, your support every month, every meeting is great, and it's appreciated because it gives us an objective review of what's being discussed, and I can fairly and objectively, kind of represent our community and what we think is best for the region.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you. Just wanted to first thank those who have come tonight and talked about the Jefferson Parkway. I and the mayor both serve on that board, and I have the pleasure of chairing that board this year. And so for those of you that don't know, our next board meeting will be held here in this room on the 21st of February at 3 p.m. We also have public comment there, and appreciate any input you have. I would encourage you to reach out to those who spoke tonight if you have interest on either side of the question.
Very good. Well, first thing I want to talk about tonight is that even though the Super Bowl was probably the most boring in recorded history, the valuable part, and frankly, most of the ads were absolutely horrible and boring, but the Arvada Police Department ad, I think, displayed our folks in blue in a very positive light, and so I'm glad that we had that opportunity, and more importantly, beyond the ad, that we had the opportunity for our police officers to receive safety equipment that's going to make their lives safer and allow them to continue to represent us so well as they do. So I assume we probably have on, well, I know it's on Facebook, on the police department's Facebook, and I'm sure we will post, if we haven't, the ad so that folks can see it. It's something that Ford Motor Company did in conjunction with a significant donation made to the city for these armor devices for our officers. On a sadder note, we saw the passing of Irv Brown here over the weekend, and Irv was a former coach for one of our high schools for many years. I got to know him personally over the years. He was married to a principal of an elementary school that I was associated with, and he's just he was a great guy that those of us who have been around the community for a long time will greatly miss. So with that, Mr. Devon, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Next Monday, we have a combined business meeting and workshop, and the workshop portion will present a sketch plan for Tree Line, which is a potential project at the corner of West 86th Parkway and Indiana Street, and also a review of waste hauler options. We'll continue that discussion from the council retreat. So we look forward to receiving your feedback and input on those items at the February 11th workshop portion, plus, of course, the business meeting.
Yeah, and to make a record on this, it's my intention, not to, it's a workshop, so normally we don't take public input, but one area we will consider public input at that meeting as it pertains to the trash hauling issue is what kind of questions should we be asking and what kind of input should we be looking for, rather than are you for it or against it, just what questions should we be asking so that we can appropriately analyze the discussion on this. Okay, Mr. Daly, anything from you? Very good. We stand adjourned.